Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who kept us going for 331 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is... Okay, so we had a debate about this. Nereus or Nerus?
Nereus.
You think Nerus? I think Nereus.
Nereus.
Okay, so one thing I did know that this is the OG god of the sea in Greek mythology, before Zeus kills, Cronus and the Titans and shit, and Poseidon replaces him. I remembered that. Could not for the life of me remember how it's pronounced, and Greek pronunciations can be pretty fucking, crazy for native English speakers. So I did Google flu on it to try and find, and like there's 3 different pronunciations that seem kind of popular. So Nerus and Nereus are the two that seemed the most likely. Lazaward. Thank you.
Either way, thank you very much for being our dude of the week.
Appreciate it. Feel free to hit me up and correct me on it. Actually, I would appreciate it if you want. But it's a slow news week. But before we hop into our topic, because you are the only one who saw this movie so far, and you've got to sell me on it. You got to sell me on some Sanic, is what's going to happen. But we've got a sponsor to thank. It is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, and I think this sponsor is deeply invested in taking care of your nuts. So
that's right, and you should be deeply invested in maintaining your nuts.
Yeah,
and taking care of them as well.
So get active in the We Save Balls movement. You can do that pretty easily by getting the performance package. Sweet ass DOP kit with it comes with the crop reviver, the crop preserver, and of course the lawnmower 4.0. Now, why is the lawnmower?
It's the whole package, and it comes with the boxer shorts too, right?
And a shirt,
boxer briefs.
Yeah,
the boxer briefs. You're getting a real whole package with the
performance package.
With the performance package. I just realized package.
And it is a very slick package where like the description of all the products is in a newspaper article. It's pretty cool.
I like the way the instructions are in an old-timey newspaper, so...
But you can't check your nuts for cancer if you don't get rid of all that bush.
That's right. It's gonna be harder. Make it easy on yourself. Make it easy on yourself and your doctor. Keep your nuts clean and trimmed.
Take care of the people who take care of you.
Yeah, and because I mean, like you want 2 good sized lumps, but you don't want any extra bumps in your sack. So
can I ask you a question? How often do you have to charge your lawnmower? By the way,
I've only charged it twice, I think.
Yeah, I've only charged it twice. We've had it for like months.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't want people to think that I'm not trimming my balls. I am, and once I trimmed my beard.
Nice, yeah.
I'd like to say like, and don't worry, I did my beard first, but I didn't. It was an afterthought, so I went balls to face.
But it's okay because again, if you're using the product regularly, your nuts are going to smell great because again, it comes with 2 different forms of deodorant, spray and lotion. And of course, like you build up less swamp ass or swamp nut. when you have less trees in your forest. So
fucking swamp ass.
Now deforestation is a problem on our planet, but it's not a problem for your junk. So
some would say it's a solution for your junk.
It's a solution for your junk. So if you ever wanted to like deforest and if you ever wanted to deforest something guilt-free, deforest your balls, with the lawnmower 4.0.
So if you want to give that a try or you want to join the We Save Balls movement, check out manscaped.com and use code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've all used it. We actually like it. You definitely feel better, especially if you're like active or working out.
Oh my God! Especially in the heat. Look, now we know we have
Summer's
listeners in
coming.
Texas. You know, we've got listeners in Texas. If you're anywhere near the Gulf Coast, good God, that humidity.
Right. Don't let your nether regions become your own Everglades and your own Gulf
Bayou.
Coast. Yeah, your own bayou.
Ooh. If anyone ever like swamp balls and swamp ass has to be terrible. Bayou balls
Yeah, your bayou billies.
sounds fun, not fun. All right. Speaking of sounds fun, you saw Sonic 2, Sonic
Right.
and Knuckles.
So, yeah, this is not going to be a review on. I already have a review. You
No,
know,
what I
link
what
in
I
it.
want to talk about is there's two very distinct things that have been going on lately where we've got the Halo show, which is almost proud that it is not really referencing the source at all. And
Yeah,
then
and
you
I
have
talked.
Sonic, which is super into the idea of all the references and
Mm-hmm. And I've talked to I talked to some Halo fans about it. Not really happy with the show.
I don't know a
Um,
single Halo fan that's particularly into it.
not really happy with the pacing of it. Not really happy with because it's not because like, oh, I just wanted to see shit blow up. There's like, okay, I understand world building and setting and
Hmm.
stuff, but like they spend a whole from what was described to me, like the whole second episode or something was like all built up, set up like to be it's all about going to like a political dinner. And they're like, who cares? Like, I like, yes, there is obviously like a lot of turmoil within the Halo universe between just the human factions, let alone humans and Covenant, whatever, and what have you. But they're just like, okay, it's just stretching so much, and people are kind of feeling that like it feels like they're stretching for budget and time. Like
Yeah,
like
this is
they
my problem
they
with
know it's going to be
most.
expensive, so like they kind of try to like not spend as much time in expensive scenarios as possible.
That's my problem with like basically every Disney Plus show so far.
Mm.
Is they spend whole episodes on what should be like 3 scenes. Like, or they'll drag you along by the fucking nut hairs to get to like one cool moment in the entire season. It's why the Book of Boba Fett sucks so bad. And apparently I gave
Or
up on it right
did you
before
watch it?
I did, yeah. And I gave up on it right before it turns into basically a secret Mandalorian season 3.
Oh yeah, there's 2 episodes that have like nothing to do with Boba Fett at
Yeah,
all.
it's just like they realized it was sucking and were like, let's. How do you waste Ming Na Wen? Like
Here's the thing. I don't.
she's easily one of the most badass whatever.
I'm way less harsh on Book of Boba Fett, which is weird because I've
You
never
don't even
really
like
liked.
Boba Fett,
I don't
yeah,
like Boba character. Like I've never.
yeah.
There's still a lot about the show that on a conceptual level that I'm just like I don't get. I don't get why he stayed there. I don't get why he wanted job as whatever. But part of me was also like, yeah, but you know what? I'm kind of happy just having a story be about like a small scale story that doesn't involve the Jedi or the Force or space wizards or
Yeah,
lightsabers.
yeah,
I
that'd be great.
actually part of me is actually very happy about that. Like I actually didn't mind the whole we're literally just remaking Lawrence of Arabia on Tatooine.
They just
I
dragged
didn't
out
mind it too
every.
much, but like I don't know. I don't know. There's the like I don't think I'm as down. I don't think I was harsh on Boba Fett because usually what it sounds like when people say like okay, because I saw the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian and I actually really liked it.
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't see
good.
the rest of it. I saw bits and pieces, and then I started recently. I started trying to like go through, kind of like skimming through episode by episode, and then like watching like the really fan favorite episodes in season 2. And the thing is, everyone kind of lost their shit at season 2 of Mandalorian, and the thing that I feel like there's a difference between what people really like about Mandalorian versus what I really like. Because what I really liked about the first 3 episodes of the first season of Mandalorian was that it was just kind of like just showing the universe in a different place on different planets with
Yeah,
different
no
characters and not.
Jedi. Yeah,
And then it felt like season 2 was shrinking the universe, and Boba Fett was a massive shrinking because everything's Tatooine. Everything has to be Tatooine. you know, like I kind of like the things I don't like about Boba. Like people don't like that there's these really cheap ass looking, 50s style diner gangsters on 50 style looking
Feels like
things,
an
and I'm like,
homage to
and I'm
Lucas,
like,
though.
yeah, they're like, yeah, look, look the hell how far Star Wars has fallen. I'm like, are you kidding? George Lucas would do this. George Lucas did do this. He put a 50s diner in episode
Yeah.
2. Like, this is nothing out of the ordinary for Star Wars. This is absolutely what George would have done if he could.
But none of that is my problem. My problem with it is that there wasn't enough like they could have done the whole series in 2 episodes. They just drag out, they stretch every little bit as much,
Yeah, I
and
don't,
like
and I
they're
don't.
just
Again, I don't mind. I think what I'm getting at here is that I don't like how small the Star Wars universe is getting.
mm,
Um, and I don't like how everything has to like have some weird interconnection to a previously well-established character. Like Ahsoka is one thing because that was already like a new character built for a TV show before. So having Ahsoka show up, that's cool. Having Luke show up is one thing as a tease, but then it's kind of like we kind of have to like, oh well, this person knew Luke, and now this person interacted with him, and the Mandalorian met him, and da da da. Actually, I don't think he did. I get it. Okay, someone's gonna Rick Mother Cole's like he never talked to Luke in that episode. He only talked to Ahsoka. I was like, okay, right, whatever. Right. I'm sorry. Point is just that the universe is getting smaller and smaller, and I kind of hate that about it. And you know, everyone's really excited for the Obi-Wan series, and I'm kind of excited. I'm excited because I like Ewan McGregor, but it's
oh
like
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, we're going back to Tatooine, and you know, and I'm really against the idea of Ewan McGregor like meeting and fighting Anakin in in um in the Obi-Wan series. You know, I know it's supposed to be like 10 years before episode 4, but like, and people are like, oh, you know, like it could still, the lines Vader says can still make sense even if they meet. And I'm like, I don't, no, I just hate the idea that
Well,
like
it
we
cheapens
haven't,
the later interaction for
right, it
sure.
does. And then like the
Yeah.
whole idea of that we have Obi-Wan and we're gonna do the series with Obi-Wan and like we have to have a, what's your big climax? Let's have him fight Vader. Why? Why is he fighting Vader? And apparently, this came out recently. Part of the rejected scripts didn't have Vader in it.
Really?
The darker, more like depressing scripts. It was going to be Maul, and
Sort of makes sense, I guess.
here's the funny thing: Filoni apparently is the one of the and Favreau are I don't know if it's Filoni or Favreau or both. Were actually the ones that came in and said these are too dark and depressing. This isn't fitting. And a part of me wonders if, you know, if it's a Filoni thing. It's like I already did Obi-Wan and Maul meeting up on Tatooine and kind of like having their final duel. And the final duel is like 4 years before A New Hope, and I've shown you that.
Yeah.
It's like the best lightsaber fight outside of the original trilogy because they played it off, and they said they played it off too, exactly like a. No, I was gonna say the composer, but the like a what's the Western Good, Bad, and the Ugly director?
Oh, Sergio Leone.
Oh, Sergio Leone. Like they played it off very Sergio Leone like. You know, there's very little act, like it's basically them staring each other down, like just kind of like close-ups, eyeballs,
Yeah, it's
like
a quick draw, yeah.
psyching each other out, and then the actual combat fight is like 10 seconds long.
Yeah.
But there's emotion in it, and there's you know, there's history there, so it's like, okay, I almost wonder if they dumped dumped Darth Maul, replace him with Vader, because it was kind of like, well, we already kind of do this already in another series that's already done. But for me, I was just kind of like, here's my thing before we get more into video game stuff, is that how much more enticing would it have been if you have an Obi-Wan series and Obi-Wan gets some sort of like whatever reason, message, distress call, something, to he has to leave Tatooine, however briefly, right? And the person he meets up with is Mace Windu. And Mace is basically very fucked up and battle hardened. And Mace is very like his ideology is this, like, we can't, doesn't matter how kicked down we were from the Empire being formed. We have to fight back. And Obi-Wan is basically like he takes the more like, no, I'm going to observe and I'm going to like protect the boy, and Mace is like kind of like forget the boy almost, or even have Mace be somewhat antagonistic, like you should probably kill him because look what happened with Anakin. We had him, we raised him, we trained him. He was in our council, and he still fell to the dark side. Maybe it's like maybe it'd be better, like maybe that would be kind of interesting if maybe like the end of the series is a climax of ideals where like Mace Windu's like, let me just get rid of Anakin, or no, sorry, Anakin. Let me just get rid of Luke. Like, tell me where he is, and we'll just get rid of him. We can't afford to have this, happen again.
I
Like,
guess I would tweak that in a way where I would have Mace Windu like knee deep on the path to the dark side for the purposes of like if he removes the Sith and takes over the mantle of the Sith, you don't have to worry about the Sith anymore in his mind, right? Having a dude
Yeah.
who lost terribly, doing the correct path, now going down this other path for power to win.
Yeah, it doesn't
would be
even have to
interesting.
be like, yeah, and it doesn't even have to like, that's just one idea of like maybe him being like we should get rid of Luke. Maybe it has nothing to do with Luke. Maybe it's just more
Yeah.
like he gets too far gone. He lost too much, including his arm and whatever, and he got like fried, and he's been fighting this sort of like underground war too long that he's kind of like lost his empathy and humanity a bit, and like have him just be like a really battled, hardened, just kind of like
Force user. He's not even a Jedi anymore.
he's just like, what if he just slipped over the abyss, where it's just kind of like he knows he's not a Jedi anymore, and he's not even intending to restore the Jedi Council. At this point, it's just, I'm just going to kill the Sith.
I think,
Like, what
I
if,
mean, Samuel L. Jackson would
and he
probably
could do
say
it.
yes. Yeah.
And Sam Jackson could do it too, where he would be the one who'd be like, yeah, like I'm going to play the guy who's like, he's not doing the wrong thing, but he's doing the right thing kind of for the wrong reasons, or just like he knows that, he knows the balance or whatever should be restored to the Force, but he's too far gone. Like, and he knows
Yeah.
he's too far gone, so he's just whatever. Like, as the last thing I do, I'm just going to take out I'm going to take out Palpatine and Vader.
Yeah, it's his
Something
character
like
from
that.
Kong.
Yes.
From Kong Skull Island, yeah. But in robes.
Yeah, like just I don't know. To me, that would have been an infinitely more fascinating way to go with Obi-Wan than Obi-Wan's going to meet Vader and on Mustafar, like why am I like at his castle or something, and they're going to
Again.
fight in front of the lava, like a rematch. I'm like,
Is-
I don't know that that's going to happen, but I mean, like it's possible. It's just like
I guess we'll see. But for the Halo series, I like Pablo Schreiber. I don't mind that they show Master Chief's face. I don't understand how you would have done that show without it. But everything else that I have seen and or heard about it, I'm just kind of like, it's like they didn't give a shit at all. So,
the one thing I've heard, I think Mike commented about like the Halo thing was that, Master Chief is very tall. Obviously, he's genetically modified super soldier, but like he's supposed to be like, I don't know if he is in the show, if he's completely bald, and he's supposed to be pale, like really pale, because they never take the damn. They rarely are like encountering sun, right?
yeah.
So it's kind of like the features are not like, it's not like it's not a critical element, but it's like it's a very simple detail, right? Like a very like, oh, this makes sense. You don't even have to have read the books to know this. Like, what would a Master Chief look like? He probably would be a completely bald, hairless space marine, and he'd probably be very pale from always wearing the armor. So
Yeah. The dark
um,
patches on his skin are all the scars from the surgeries and stuff.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like that seemed like a very easy thing to do, but they didn't do. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of funny because like I think a lot of people kind of stopped talking about it after a couple episodes,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people just fell off the series already. Like it's already kind of like it's over for some people.
I mean, just hearing the things about the first episodes, I was like, nah, I lost all interest. Like I lost
and
motivation.
and and they're doing it week to week, if I remember right. They're not doing it. It's not binged like Netflix, right?
Yeah. So if So even if there is good stuff later, I don't think anyone's gonna make it. Yeah,
Yikes.
so it's kind of sad, but that's what. Look, you have platform fatigue, where it's like there's too many
Mhm,
outlets now, and then on top of that, like you alienated the audience that would have cared,
mhm. Yeah.
like that would have bought the platform for the or subscribed to the platform for this. Your first press briefing about it, you're like, yeah, we didn't even look at the games. What? Why? Why would you say that?
Did someone say that? Like
The
they didn't even,
showrunner.
the showrunner didn't
Yeah,
say that?
the head writer was like, yeah, we didn't even reference the games at all, and he
Good
was
start.
proud of it. And he was like, how do you
You know,
who? Well, it's kind of like the guy who wrote the upcoming Resident Evil series. Where it's just like it's
yeah, with
clearly
Lance Reddick.
supernatural, but with Wesker's daughters this time.
It's like there was like this was a script that had existed before Resident Evil was attached to it, and you just attached Resident Evil to it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like this guy wanted to make a sci-fi epic, and he didn't give a shit about Halo at all, like the bare minimum.
that kind of really, it's a very dead horse at this point. And again, I actually feel bad for the actors, but it reminds me a lot of what the showrunner for Cowboy Bebop was saying.
Oh,
When they're
yeah.
talking, when they're talking about the potential, it's like, well, the nice thing about Bebop is that it can go on forever. There's always going to be new bounties to hunt, new rewards to collect. And I'm like, boy, did you miss the ending? Like one of the, because anime's so fucking bad when it comes to endings. I don't
Hmm.
know. I've heard it's kind of just a problem in Japanese storytelling. Period. Kind of like a French thing, where French people just sort of like feel like they end
Yeah.
their stories and movies mid sentence. Um, but yeah, like Bebop has like is one of the most defined and praised definitive endings
Uh-huh.
in the medium. And it's like that should have been. How was that not your goal when you're adapting it? Like I don't care what regardless of how you adapt it or what you do to it. I'm like going in knowing that like this has one of the most conclusive and well-regarded definitive ending episodes ever. How do you not just put that in the back of your mind? I'm like that we got to make sure we
Yeah.
hit that ending.
Well, one of the things that like I feel bad for is, and I haven't watched the whole series. I never really saw. I saw scenes with God, the villain. Why am I blanking on the villain's name?
Vicious.
Vicious, thank you. Yeah, and like how over the top, just awful, and nothing like the Vicious in the anime.
Mm-hmm.
But then like the scenes with just the main characters, with Faye Jet and uh, fuck.
Spike.
Spike. I'm having like it's been a long day for me, all right? I've been up since 5. Um, but you see those scenes and you see clips of them and like they're all sort of killing it in terms of performance.
Yeah.
Doing the fast talking and kind of like, just like even with the complaints people had about Faye, like she's
Mm-hmm.
sort of nailing the delivery of all that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
juxtaposed with like just these awful. I don't know if like on purpose he's playing the character operatic maybe, or like he's just so over the top that you can't take him seriously.
Yeah, yeah. Vicious feels like he lost. I mean, I don't know if it's the wig and the hair or whatever, but it's like he plays it like he lost to Henry Cavill for The Witcher, and he's playing him like a sort of like seedy Geralt. Is like what I kept
Yeah,
feeling. Like,
but even then, like all of his like when Henry Cavill's playing Geralt, he doesn't do like over the top
well, no,
movements
because and
and
here's the other thing: Henry Cavill apparently loves the character
yeah.
and loves the books.
Hmm.
And they've even consulted with him, and he's even argued on set about certain things, or
He makes up dialogue that are references to the books
intentionally
and stuff. Yeah.
put in stuff because it's like this is a reference, or this is what Geralt would say or do in this situation. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Cowboy Bebop show was its own special kind of fuck up, I guess.
And I was calling it from the beginning.
Sure. I don't think anybody was that surprised. I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. I try to give any of these adaptations a benefit of the doubt, at least until I've seen something of it, just because I mean, you're never gonna live up to the source material exactly.
Yeah,
in most things.
The thing is that I said, and most people agreed with me, was like the Cowboy Bebop show should have just been
frame for frame.
an in-universe side story to the anime. Like it shouldn't have been about Jet, Spike, Faye. Just have it set in the universe, but with a different set of bounty hunters. The problem is no one's going to go for that because they're like, even when an executive doesn't know anything about a show, he's going to be like, well, you got to make sure you have these characters and it has this spaceship. It's got to have the Bebop. It's got to have the swordfish.
Yeah,
nobody wants to make what was technically a spin-off.
The world wasn't the interesting part of that show. The characters were the interesting parts of that show.
The world was interesting enough, but you're correct in that sense. Where like it's not what carries the show. People are not tuning in to see, what each different planet are souls. Like nobody was watching the show to see what the world looked like, or what this area looked like. But it was really interesting how there was just, again, it was very nicely done. Like they just give you enough information. Like on Venus, you have to take tablets because of all the helium or whatever in the air.
Yeah.
Just simple things like that, or how like, if you the low gravitiness of asteroids and stuff like that, or whatever. Like there's nice simple little things in there. Kind of like in a way, it reminds me a little bit of how James Cameron is very meticulous about how he designs his world, even if they don't spend a great deal of time explaining things to you. Like, like same with Abyss, Aliens, of course, but of course, and then Avatar, obviously, where you can feel however you want about it, but like he was meticulous in his world building.
Oh yeah,
for his Avatar movies, and he's meticulous with his science. Same with Battle Angel Alita, where here's a subtle change in Battle Angel Alita. I don't think a lot of people knew, even consider like Omega level fans. So in Battle Angel Alita, there's a space elevator, right? Like a surface to low orbit space elevator.
Yeah.
Where the rich people live above. In the manga, it's in Nebraska. In the film, which he wrote and had to have a third of his script cut out, and didn't even direct, but it's still in the film. It takes place in Ecuador, and there's a very specific reason.
Because it's beyond the equator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because for James Cameron, it was like, well, the science doesn't add up. You would, if you were going to have you can make a space elevator. Like you can actually make a surface to low orbit elevator. You can do it, but to make it work properly, it would have to be on the equator. So he shifts, like he makes this kind of, you could say it's kind of like a major shift for the storyline, but he's like, no, I'm putting it here because the science adds up here.
I mean, but it doesn't actually add up, but you could also do it on the poles.
Yeah, but I mean, then people are living on the poles, and that doesn't make any sense.
Sure, yeah. But like the science of elevators, space elevators, doesn't add up at all. Like, I mean, but if you were somehow going to pull it off, it would make a hell of a lot more sense to put it on the equator.
Well, it's because the axis is tilt, right, for seasons and stuff. So it's like if you're on the equator, that's actually less you have to worry about. Which is why you would do it there, and not do it on way up in Nebraska.
Okay, so tell me the things that Sonic and Sonic 2 got right.
So yeah, here we go. Let's really just kind of like dive into this thing. This thing opened to a $71 million weekend. It's not Spider-Man, but it's like one of the biggest weekends.
Bad.
It's one of the biggest weekends since Spider-Man, and it is the biggest weekend opening for a video game movie. So we have our new So we have our new reigning champ of video game opening weekends.
It even beat GoldenEye.
GoldenEye's not a game-based movie, though.
I know.
Lost me there. GoldenEye came out way after the movie too. The game
I know, yeah.
was hyper delayed.
It's still
But
funny. You've never heard that reference before, where people think that like GoldenEye was a movie that came out after the game?
really,
Yeah.
huh?
It's like
Maybe
it was on 9gag, and actually, I guess now it's been 10 years. Fuck.
I mean,
It's on 9gag when I was in college. I'm
having
fucking
having
old.
having been there when the movie, having been alive when the movie released, and then years later the game. I guess
Yeah.
I never put that together. I would say that like I think probably more people remember the game than the movie. Um,
Well, I think the
I,
game has more like cultural phenomena.
oh yeah, like the
Although
movie
the
was kind of.
movie's pretty fucking
Well, the movie is kind of fun. It's fondly remembered because it's Pierce Brosnan, and they're like, "Hey, it was kind of like a nice get back, nice return to form, right?"
and it
Because
was the last Cold War Bond,
yeah,
right?
like a lot of people were kind of like put off from the '80s Bonds films, from what I understand, and for a lot of people, GoldenEye was a nice big return to form factor film.
Hmm.
Um, and people like Pierce Brosnan. They thought he was a good Bond, and it was his first movie, and people really like Sean Bean's character, and then of course like the goofy '90s as fuck Boris, with his pen.
Yes.
Um,
In the
oh,
90s, that guy was like
oh,
everywhere.
okay, yeah, shit. But yeah. But anyways, yeah, like Sonic is here. We have our new champ for video game opening weekends, and here's the funny thing, like critically it obviously not doing much, like 67% or something, whatever, right?
That's not bad though.
But it's got like a 97% audience approval rating and an solid A cinema score. So
That's pretty good.
it's resonating really hard with people like who are watching it. The critics don't get it. um and then even the funny thing is, I've even seen people kind of like, even small time critics on just on like YouTube and whatever. Like even they're not kind of not getting it that much. Um, Infamously, well, now people will be on your side, Andrew. Arlo's taken a beating. He was trending on Twitter because he put up a review where he just he did not like the movie. He didn't get it. He had his review, and people were just fucking pissed at him. Which I thought was, a bit of the fandom showing its ass. Where I'm like, this guy didn't like the movie. Fucking move on with your day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
How dare
a lot of it has to do with, and this is where he kind of buries himself a little bit, where he sits there and says, he prefaces by saying he's not a huge Sonic guy, but then he says like the filmmakers don't seem to care and don't seem to get Sonic, and this movie's so bad, and then like and then it's kind of like, no, you're missing like where it's kind of like, yeah, but the filmmakers do. I think what it really boils down to is this. Here's the sort of like sifting through all the fucking mud of the criticisms and anti-criticisms and counters and retorts, is that there's a level of acceptance that I think you have to have going into this movie, and I had it, which is it is a sequel to the last Sonic movie they did.
you.
Okay. And the last Sonic movie, I think, was a happy accident, not necessarily, a great video game film, because the last movie was very much written and filmed and planned in the vein of being a movie like Hop, like the Yogi Bear, like the Alvin and the Chipmunks, like the Smurfs, like hybrid live action CG movies. It was played out like that. The movie takes place in this small Montana town about a cop and his hot wife, and they want to move to San Francisco, and then they meet the CG famous outside the film universe, but like they meet a cartoon CG character, and then they get into hijinks, and there's a stupid road trip, and there's like, wacky hijinks along with like, the sort of like, oh, we learn to come together and become friends or a family or whatever. Nothing is stronger than family. And that's what the movie is. It is very much like, a Smurfs, or a Hop or a Yogi Bear or something fucking dumb like that, right?
That sounds awful.
Right, it is an Alvin and the Chipmunk style movie, but it was a happy accident because like it wasn't outright terrible. Like it wasn't you didn't want to stab, your eyes out, with a butter knife.
And apparently Jim
Uh
Carrey killed it.
And Jim Carrey helps really, really helps the movie. The redesign really helped. A lot of people got really attached to the fact that Sega would like actually, well, not Sega. Like Sega tried to warn them actually beforehand, but like the filmmakers, the director, and and Paramount, the studio, took the criticisms directly to heart about how fucking awful it was looking, character model wise. So everyone was kind of like really happy that they went ahead and um changed the character model. Like they hired a Sonic fan who's now a co-producer on the new movie, by the way,
Hell yeah.
to redesign Sonic. And so everyone was kind of like cheerleading the movie because the studio listened, which that's great that they did. Although I think it definitely goes to people's heads a bit. They're like, "This is what happens when you listen to fans. It's like we control the narrative, we control the power." And it's like,
we the fans.
I'm like, you guys are just as much a detriment as you are, a boon. So, but it was an awful looking thing, and even Jim Carrey said like, yeah, I was not super pleased with how it was originally looking, and I kind of made. He's just like, I kind of like voiced it a bit, and then I was like, I was really happy when they made that decision. It's like, but yeah, like I think. But anyways, my point is that you kind of have to go into this movie with an expectation of like you're a bit saddled with the narrative they built up from the first movie because it is a sequel. It's not like they're making a movie 15 years later and they don't have to like have any connection to the past film. This is a film that came out like 2 years after the last one, right?
Is it entirely the same cast?
Yeah. So it's like you have this sort of built-in thing. It's on Earth. Sonic lives with a human couple. They live in Montana. Yada yada. Like and then the movie tries to basically like build in all these different scenarios to sort of ignore that fact, right? But at the end of the day, it's like you have James Marsden there and his hot wife and all this other, and like a lot of people would be happy if they just cut it out altogether, but it's kind of like at the end of the day, it's still a movie that like if we're going to have Jim Carrey be Jim Carrey, like that comes with certain things. Like he had an assistant that's actually in love with him. And it's like he's in the movie. And he's actually kind of funny or whatever. He has a lot of funny moments and stuff in the film as well, but it's like it's still a film that at the end of the day takes place on our planet, has human characters,
has to be grounded here,
has to have a somewhat of a grounding, although they try to, it feels like they try to get away from it as much as they could, but like yes, there is that aspect of it, and there kind of is no getting away from it. The only getting away from it would just to be like to basically reboot the movie again.
So I typically don't like the CGI plus human, like that sort of mix. Granted, I know I watch Marvel movies, so how much can I really complain? But the point is, like, I typically don't like that, but I've heard that Jim Carrey really makes it worth watching, and then also
and here's the interesting thing about that is there's extremely minimal interaction besides Jim Carrey. Like Jim Carrey's in his own bubble, right?
Yeah.
But like when I'm talking about all the other human characters, James Marsden, his wife, and then like the wife's sister and his fiance, and they're all in their own B plot. And Sonic and Tails and Knuckles and Robotnik are in A plot. So they're very like only at the beginning and the end do you really even have James Marsden even interacting with Sonic at all. It's kind of interesting, and I think that's probably a bit where I think the success of the movie comes in a bit, where it's just kind of like we're not gonna saddle Sonic with James Marsden, and then having to like write all these scenarios and action scenes and everything with a real human person in front of a green screen. It's like, no, we can do more wackier shenanigans with just Sonic and Tails being, in a scene, and what their movement and capabilities are means we don't have to worry about a real human actor. Like there is Jim Carrey, and trust me, there is a shot in this movie that looks completely unfinished.
Really?
With Jim Carrey and like he's just sitting in his little egg robot, like the green screen behind him is like it's a still image. Like a completely still image. But
I love Ben Schwartz though. So I've always been curious about how he is as
I think he does, because they emphasize again in this film that he's still a kid. This is not a Sonic that's been around the block for a long time or whatever. He's still a kid and he's still like doing kid things and still. So they really emphasize that. And I think Ben Schwartz works like that because Chris Redfield Sonic. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name. Like whoever does Chris Redfield in Resident Evil, or did actually. He doesn't even do Chris Redfield anymore. Roger Craig Smith.
He was Sonic the Hedgehog too.
Yeah, he's been Sonic for a long time.
That's a wild ass resume, bro.
Yeah, his Sonic is good, but his Sonic works in a sort of I've been beating up Eggman for years now, and it's like okay, that works. Ben Schwartz being a kid works, and then they decided not to recast Tails, like they just pulled Colleen O'Shanahy from the games and like your Tails,
Hell yeah.
which everyone was happy with because I'm like yeah, and really like I would hate it if it was like hey we're gonna have Sarah Silverman play Tails.
How dare you? I love Sarah Silver.
Not coming out of Tails. And yes, Idris Elba's great. Idris Elba
is great.
He's fucking. It's funny because he's fucking Drax. Like that's how they handle Knuckles in this movie, like completely like Drax.
Really?
Yeah, and it works. It works really well. Because like they've kind of been like recently in the games they've been treating Knuckles as a himbo. And he's not a Chris Hemsworth himbo in the movie. He's way more of a Drax.
Okay.
He's not dumb. He just completely misses out on cues, or sarcasm or whatever. And they're like, it's like they do this thing because it's a good foil, right? Where it's like Knuckles is all business and all serious all the time, and Sonic's constantly wisecracking, and like it pisses Knuckles off.
Yeah.
And he's just like, why must you always joke kind of thing. Like there's a very, very early on, it's not too spoiler, but like a very simple example is there's a scene where Knuckles is literally using his knuckles to climb up a hillside, up a mountainside. And Robotnik comes to him and you think like Robotnik's about to turn on him or whatever. And then he's like, if you think your puny machines will defeat me, and then all of a sudden he like stops himself mid-sentence and looks and notices that the machines hovering around him made stairs for him to climb. He's like, oh, stairs. Just kind of like, is it like he hops off and like Robotnik Jim Carrey does some Jim Carrey shit and like he does some like flossing dancing because like a sort of callback to the first Sonic movie, and like Idris Elba just like looking at him and goes, I understand nothing of what you are saying.
So what you're saying is that like this has sort of nailed it on a video game adaptation.
Yeah,
that isn't an animated movie entirely.
Yeah, I think it's about as with the setup they gave you in the first movie. This is as close to a good, a faithful adaptation as you can get. And here's okay. I just want to say it's a tiny bit spoilery, but I want to say they take what is mostly just an Easter egg joke and put it into the script as a significant plot point, which is early in the movie, and you see it in the trailers. Like there's a scene where he's talking with James Marsden in a boat in a lake, right? He tries to take him out to do a little father-son fishing and give him like, a talk about responsibility, right? His Uncle Ben moment. And before he's having that moment, like Sonic is like going out there and he's been out all night doing his superhero shtick, and he falls asleep at the boat, right? While they're fishing. And he falls into the water. And then he goes, help, oh my God, help, I can't swim. And James Marsden has to pull him out of the lake and into the boat, right? So that's funny if you're a Sonic fan, because Sonic can't swim in the game.
Yeah.
It's always been a fucking issue in the games, right?
Sinks like a rock.
Sinks like a rock. They call back to that later in the movie, and they make it part of Sonic's character arc.
He runs across the water?
Yeah, there's a part where he's just like, where like he's like, water. Why did it have to be water? And there's a running across water part. And there's a part where he has to get over his fear of water to like do something heroic. And then it also ties in later too, where it's like he can't swim, so he actually learns he has to depend on others, for not just himself, kind of thing. So like they take what you could have just had that joke early in the movie, like just as an Easter egg, Sonic can't swim. And then they're like, well, let's use this as part of the character arc and use it throughout the movie and sort of like make it like a thing that has to get over kind of thing. or use it as part, build it into the storyline,
So
and
we're
not just have a gag. But it's like, okay, it's a direct callback, a direct reference to the video game, and we're working it into the script as a sort of character building moment as well.
So something that's interesting about that is that that's sort of a key element of adaptation is not just, you don't have to like word for word switch things from the game to the screen or from the book, whatever type of adaptation, but like using a key element of the character in the source material as like a key thematic element in your new thing, is a great way to adapt something. And I think in video games, it's more important because like in a book, you get a thematic element, or in if you're adapting a comic book or something, usually there's some theme already in it. But video games, especially older ones like Sonic and stuff, don't necessarily have a distinct, clear, thematic question that the story is exploring.
There's no character growth arc and for Sonic in a Sonic game,
Yeah, not really.
Especially in an old one.
And grounding that character growth arc in something that is a direct reference to an element in the game is sort of brilliant, because it's great for an audience that's never played the games, if there is, that audience viewing it.
Yeah, because like a complete, if you're completely new to Sonic or whatever, you're just gonna be like, oh, well, I guess he can't swim, and then you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like a thing, and I'm like, actually, that's from the games. It's kind of like it works on two levels. You don't have to know. You don't have to have played the games to know this is a problem, because they set up very early on in the movie, oh shit, Sonic can't swim. Well, and then they build it into his character arc. And then it's like, also for anyone who's just a fan of the old games, I'm like, ha, yeah, I remember that. And like, there's these lines, and Kenny didn't really catch on to that when we were watching it. I kept chuckling every time Sonic kept getting like, scared, or like, oh God, water. Why does it have to be water, kind of thing. And that's like, yeah, every Sonic fan, every time you get to the water level.
Well, it's the same thing we were talking about with like the Master Chief not being pale and bald, and being scarred all over the, like, that's something, grounding for the character. You can ground your character in the universe of the game and never have to talk about the game.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem with a lot of video game movies. Maybe...
Yeah, like they either kind of like go on their own weird way tangent that doesn't really work.
Or they try to over-explain.
Yeah, or over-explain or something like that, and it's just kind of like, no, just take a step back, like look at what is sort of like in the game, what's sort of known, and then like, what is this? How does this work in a completely different narrative structure? Like I'll keep going back to Zelda, and I keep saying, especially if you look at Ocarina of Time, which has story, it has plot, whatever, but it, like, as sort of Max was pointing out when we were going through it for the first time, and he was being, it's like this it's like the writing is very dry in this game. It's very much just sort of like, get here, get instructions, go do this, and like it's like tiny exposition and instructions. There's not a lot of.
It was over the top great for the time it came out, though.
Well, I mean, still, like, I mean, it did come out like, I think in his mind he's looking at it like Final Fantasy VII, because everyone compares the two, which is better, which is the best game, and it's like, well, Ocarina is a better game from a gameplay standpoint. Final Fantasy is a better game from a narrative standpoint, because the characters don't, and there are character moments in there, but the writer of the game has talked before how Miyamoto hated it, wanted it out of the game, and how he would sneak it in to places that he knew Miyamoto wasn't going to check. So, old man Miyamoto was kind of like ruining having these sort of like character-ish moments. So they have to be all sort of like buried, or snuck into Ocarina of Time. But like, he's right though, in a sense where I'm like, the script's very dry for Ocarina. So if you were just doing a straight adaptation, which a lot of people just think, oh, it'd be great, episode 1, he's in the forest, and he's going to go into the tree, and he's going to kill the spider, and then he's going to go to the field, and he's going to meet Malin, and then he's going to meet Zelda, and like, and you're just thinking in your head, like, we'll just make episode, it's just, like, but he's just doing things. It's like, it's just kind of like cause and effect, action, reaction.
It's like no character moments.
Right, and it's like, okay, you're not, okay. There is that, but what you can do, you can step back, look at Ocarina, of Time objectively, and say, like, how do I make an interesting story here? How about we look at the dynamics of the different races around there, and how like you had the what's called the War of Unification, with the Zoras and the Gorons. You made a pact with, you know, the King of Hyrule, and it's like, who did they make a pact with? Who were they fighting against? And then you can sort of like, you can go into this whole, you know, geopolitical thing with the Hylians versus the Gerudo, and how the Sheikah were like, you know, this underhanded, like they were basically assassins and stuff like that. And like there's things you can pull from the game text that isn't expanded upon in the games, but you could sit there and go like, okay, I know how to make this work. We can make this really interesting. We can make a sort of dynamic, you know, between, you know, the different characters and the different races and the different, you know, areas of the game world, rather than just like episode A, he's here, episode B, he's here, episode C, he's here.
Yeah.
It's like,
and either way, you're still going to have people that are mad that it isn't that, you know, direct image to image transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really recently, they just, I think it just finished in Japan. I don't think it's out here in the English yet, but the Twilight Princess manga, which ran for years, took years to finish. And one of the reasons I guess it did is we've sort of found out now is they greatly expanded on the story, but like they greatly expanded on the character interaction moments and moments of characters that barely had any lines in the original game.
Right.
And they did a fantastic job. Like the two biggest things I think that the manga did way better and should have been in the game was Ganondorf's characterization and the Hero Shade characterization. It's funny because it's almost like someone's been fucking stealing from Mike, you know, for years, because they do this whole thing where like they show how like it is Ocarina of Time Link and how he got old and how he never could, you know, pass on his knowledge or like fully like, you know, commit to a peaceful future. And like there's a lot more going into it where, you know, he's having conversations with Twilight Princess Link and stuff like that, and
being an actual mentor,
stuff like that, and like Ganondorf kind of realizing he's just like, there's this great fucking conversation piece where like they're just at a dinner table and he's just having like this sort of like villainous monologue about it, and he's just like, oh, like, you know, I know you're, you know, I know Zelda, you know, obviously we don't obviously agree, or, you know, you might not like me. He's like, but here's the thing, I've realized what's going on. He's like, I realize what's going on with this Triforce and this destiny thing or whatever. And he says, like, we're just kind of like, it doesn't seem to matter. Like, you kill me, I'll be dragged into the pits of hell, and then I'll be resurrected, and then I'm just going to come back. And we're going to be in this cycle forever. And he's just like, I propose we break this cycle. He's like, why don't you join me, kind of thing. Like, he basically tries to, like, you know, talk her into basically, like, breaking this forever destined cycle of violence kind of thing. And I'm like, yes, why aren't they doing this in the games? You know, stuff like that. Like the Midna Link.
Nobody got time for that.
Yeah, I know. But it's kind of like it was a long game and it had a lot of dialogue, and it always felt like it could have used it more. You know, there was you know, and then like the relationship between Link and Midna got really expanded in the manga.
Do you think Twilight Princess would make a better movie than Ocarina of Time?
I think
if you were adapting, I mean, Majora's Mask would make the most interesting movie in terms of just like how weird you could get, and it has a clear 3-act structure. But, you know, of the two,
well, the thing was with Twilight Princess that makes it interesting is that it is following. It's sort of like it is following up on the events of Ocarina and how like people are kind of locked into this. Twilight Princess is sort of like a repeating, like at least in the manga, especially, where it's kind of like, hey, we're trapped in this eternal cycle where Ocarina is like introducing you to that cycle.
Yeah, right. So
some would say Skyward Sword, but Skyward Sword's trash, so I'm not going into that.
Which game?
Skyward Sword.
I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't exist.
Trash.
Never heard of it.
I mean, it would almost be an easier thing to adapt Breath of the Wild, because it's so far flung in the future. And boy, is there a lot of things that has no fucking relevance in Breath of the Wild that it's like, wow, you could really easily,
you could do whatever you want,
you know, change and do whatever you want. Yeah, with the storyline of Breath of the Wild is like as basic as it fucking gets. With like sort of like the setup to the plot and whatever, and it would actually be kind of fun because again, Link's a bit of a fish out of water.
There's
You know,
mechs.
there's mechs, although the mechs are leftovers from a sci-fi plot they abandoned, which really wish it would have gone that way. Actually,
This is a cool
um,
plot. Yeah.
yeah, um, but yeah, like yeah, like that's the thing is like adaptation's a tricky thing, right? And and I think it's proven over the years to be even trickier for games because it's hard to say like okay do you make it I think you make it too faithful to the games and it just comes off as weird and sort of like
Yeah.
kind of messy, right? Or you
Or
have
stilted.
really, yeah, stilted, that's a good one. And or like you have no real connection and then it just kind of feels like it just feels like you slap together names on a different script, right? Like as we see with that upcoming Netflix Resident Evil show
Yeah.
where you almost feel like I don't want to say gaslit, but like it almost feels like feels cheap. Like it feels like
You were tricked.
you're tricked,
Yeah.
or like someone was trying to trick you, but they're not tricking you. Like to a lesser degree, I don't think you've ever seen it, but have you ever seen the movie Brave?
Yeah.
Um, can you spot the part where the director quit and was replaced with another director?
Yeah, well, I guess it's been a while since I've seen Brave because I don't remember all of it, but I've seen it. But
Well, the movie went through some definite like turmoil, and the director quit halfway through, and another director took over, and like you can fucking see it, like you can see it happen in real time in the film. Um,
I'm gonna have to rewatch that now, just knowing that.
granted, it's an animated film, and they're not like trying for anything like major shift tonally. Um,
No, but I do remember that it is confusingly like the build up for Brave was super great, like a lot of hype, and then
mhm.
it sort of just petered out after.
Yeah, and
Although Merida is still really well loved.
like you can just see right where the director changed. There's I keep going back to like animated films. This probably drives you nuts. There's
I don't watch as much animated films as you do.
there's an older now, although we're very old, but there's an older film where you can see how it was you watch a movie and you can see how there were four different scripts. There's a movie called Meet the Robinsons,
Oh yeah.
and it's like you can see how you like there's like six or eight writers on the film, and boy, you can
Yeah.
tell.
Isn't that the
Um,
one where there's like a T-Rex?
yes.
I have a big head and tiny arms.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
there's like this pretty good setup beginning and then there's a really good payoff in the very very end. And then there's a confused as fuck middle where it feels like about four different scripts were kind of like pieced together to try to appease as many of the
Hmm.
original writers as possible. It's like it's this fucking confused, film.
So
And it's
the way those rewrites happen, by the way, in case you're ever curious about this, and maybe I've said this before, but so you write your movie, and usually you'll get one rewrite
mm,
in the contract, and you'll do the notes, and then they'll probably not speak to you again. Hire on either another writing team who will do everything in their power to change as much as possible so that they can then get writers credits on the
mm,
back end, because then you have to split the 2 points that you get on the back end.
mm.
So like as the screenwriter, you usually get about 2 points on the back end, but it's if you get credited, you have to split those points. And the only way to get credited is like dialogue, stuff that makes it on screen. So that's why a lot of the times you'll see like every new writing team will just change everything they possibly can. And sometimes they'll change shit just to change it so they can argue they
Yeah,
wrote more of the
they
movie.
wrote more. Yeah, and it's also there's also movies where like it's the same director, like it's one director, right?
Hmm.
And it feels like tonal whiplash. I don't like the movie at all, but like 28 days later, bring it up again, it felt like three different movies.
Well, I mean, there's definitely three different, I would say the first third of that movie is pretty fucking solid.
Pretty solid, right? Pretty solid. And then
The second third of that movie is, and then the last fight is sort of interesting. Like the last act is sort of interesting, but really
interesting,
it's like the first third.
but also stupid. There's also things that drive me nuts
Oh,
in the
hell yeah.
writing of that film.
Yeah.
The whole what are they infected with? Rage, whatever. Okay, like we're just going to affront science like that. Okay, and then I've personally have always been like, it's been 2 weeks or 4 weeks, right? 28 days later. I don't think the British armed services would devolve into rapist degenerates within 4 weeks. I mean, people spend longer at that at sea on submarines. They're they're not going to be that. They're not going to devolve like
Well,
ethically, morally that fucking hard, that fucking fast.
End of the
Like,
World does some shit.
sure, but I mean, it kind
I
of
think
just
is the
felt
point.
like it kind of just felt like anti. It just kind of like struck me as like anti-military a bit. Or I'm just like,
Something that I've always been interested with about, you know, I mean, lots of Hollywood films have stupid fucking explanations like rage being the infection, weaponized rage. But that shit flies in like say, media from the UK. Shit like that, premises like that will fly. Whereas like the idea of pitching that as the cause of whatever's causing your viral outbreak here, you'd get laughed out of the fucking room.
hmm.
Oh yeah, they put rage into monkeys, and then the monkeys got out and bit somebody, and then that person turned into a rage zombie. And like in the UK, I don't know if it's just because like there's a lot more state funding, so like they're just churning stuff out. But it's amazing. And 28 Days Later it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it.
I'd say it's a third of a good movie.
No, it's a good movie, and it did change the zombie genre. Like it reinvented it in a lot of ways. But it's a good movie. Another movie that I also just thought about and is the same sort of title, but where like the first third is pretty fucking good, the middle third is kind of bleh, and then the last third is sort of awesome, is 30 Days of Night.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's another like,
Is it
28 days
Alaska
later, 30 days.
or like Netherlands where it takes place? I forget which.
It's in Alaska.
Alaska, yeah.
And it's like the first 30 minutes or so, if I'm remembering correctly, are pretty solidly good. Like the build up to the
Hmm.
the vampires being there and shit, and then there's like
Yeah.
the middle part which is just sort of boring.
Hmm.
And then there's that last part where all the fighting happens and you're kind of like, hell yeah. Um but yeah, I don't know. Actually, 30 Days a Night was a comic book, wasn't it? It was a comic book adaptation.
It might have been, but I think comic books have had an easier time getting adapted because again, it is
They're
a
visual.
story.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
a
visual medium.
storytelling medium. And with Sonic, regardless of how the critics feel, the audience is eating it up, except for poor Arlo.
Well, because
Leave
it
the man
sounds like
alone.
it was a well-made movie that used elements of a game rather than
Right. The question, I guess, now is like, do we have a formula for adapting games?
no.
Or is it just way more gamers are in the writers' room now, so they have a better pulse on what to do.
I do think that is part of it. We've aged up kind of into that,
Mhm.
you're in different writers' rooms. I also think older games like that have basic story elements but don't have, you know,
Yeah, like
it, the new Mortal Kombat.
overarching plots, right?
The new Mortal Kombat is a perfect example of the baggage that comes
Mhm.
later in a series than, say, the original Mortal Kombat adaptation. The original Mortal Kombat adaptation came out at a time where most people were just kind of happy that there was a fucking game adaptation happening.
Mhm.
And so you gave it a lot of leeway. I'm not going to say that it's a great fucking movie, but it's not the worst video game movie that's ever been made. The original.
It's funny because a lot of people are like, well, it's a lot of people say now, like, okay, so Sonic 2 is like the best game adaptation film, and a lot of people say like the original Mortal Kombat is the second best.
I would argue that. I would
Yeah, yeah, and
argue
it's
that
not
the
like they're
original Mortal
not
Kombat movie's the best video game movie to
right,
date.
and it's kind of like yeah, and it's like I guess I can kind of see that, but I also feel like that's kind of crazy to me because it doesn't even have the core element of the game, which is gore and fatalities.
Right, yes.
It's kind of like this weird thing where I'm like, the thing that the game is most known for is absent in the film, and yet it's still kind of technically the most accurate adaptation. It's probably just because like the most, that element of the game that is so well known is an effect. It's just a special effect.
Yeah.
The actual plot of the games is followed mostly correctly in that original Mortal Kombat
Yeah,
movie.
it's in there. The newest Mortal Kombat movie sort of said fuck it. Created a character for no reason.
And it was rated R. It's
Which
funny because
I thought it was fun, but like it's not. I don't think it's as good as the original.
that new one feels more like what I would have expected from a '90s Mortal Kombat film, back
Right?
when studios had no faith in the material they were adapting or nor knowledge. So that's why you would see like a fucking original MC Do Not Steal show up. And yet that's the one that's happening in the more recent one, where it's like we've been through decades of Mortal Kombat now, and we definitely have like an established canon lore or whatever. Why are we doing the original character? This is fucking weird. I don't know.
I think
like
fighting games in general, I think, are really good. Like they're really good for adaptation. Like they're ripe for adaptation into a movie because there's very few elements that you need to like grab to make them good. You already have the conflict built in. They're gonna fucking fight, right? You're just taking
and wanted.
Yeah, you're taking these characters that are, they're not overly developed, but they have clear backstories usually, most of them.
And a lot of times they're larger than life.
Yeah.
They're distinct. They're visually distinct. They're personality distinct.
And the only fucking thing you really have to do is link their scenes together.
Yeah, like glue it together. And they don't do it, which is funny because like there's multiple there's multiple Tekken movies, there's a King of Fighters movie, there's a Dead or Alive movie.
Yeah.
And then there's multiple Street Fighter movies, and these are live action I'm talking about. I'm not even getting into the animated stuff. But I will say this. The Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, which has a bit role for Bryan Cranston early in his career, way better, right? Like it's like almost like the adaptation. It's like when you talk about animated stuff, like Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, is kind of the gold standard for like a proper game adaptation, and it's everything you said, because like you have these characters, you have their conflict, you have their personalities and their look and and all you had to do was just glue it together. Like the film's a little, maybe that's just because of where we are and where we grew up, but like, it feels a little Ryu centric when Ryu's not really part of the plot in Street Fighter 2. It's supposed to be a guy. Like Guile gets kind of shafted a bit, and that's probably just because it's an anime for Japan and they don't give a shit about an American Air Force pilot.
Yeah.
So he gets a little bit of the shaft. Like, granted, if it's still great and it still has a great finish and payoff and everything. It's like, and it works. Yeah, like it takes a bit of a twist where Bison is looking for like like the ultimate, I think he wants like the ultimate like physical body to probably, I don't know, mind meld with or transform or whatever. But anyways, like they do this whole thing where like Bison's looking for the best fighter, which is not really a plot point of Street Fighter 2. He's just the boss.
Well,
but
look,
like
I mean,
it's fine. It's fine. I'm not trying to shit on Street Fighter 2 the anime movie. I'm just saying like it takes a little bit of a liberty because it kind of emphasizes Ken and Ryu as main characters more than Guile and Chun-Li, even though Guile and Chun-Li, to the American side of things, to us are like the narrative main characters against Bison, not Ken and Ryu. But it's fine. It's totally fine.
I think the easiest way to adapt Street Fighter now, if you're going to do a live action Street Fighter, is you just steal all the plot points of Bloodsport. It's just a fucking Kumite held up by Bison.
Yes.
And that's it. It's like Guile's going to whatever main character you want, going to find where their brother died or something.
Yeah,
it was
Guile's looking for the guy who killed Charlie, who's running the tournament. Chun-Li's looking for the guy who killed her father, who's apparently running this tournament. Ryu's just looking for the strongest fight, which is kind of funny. It's always funny to me how, like, and they do this with the other animes, like the Alpha movie, Street Fighter Alpha, and the Street Fighter V series, and it's like, it's funny to me how much they keep putting like Ryu as like, he's gonna, the answer lies in heart. I'm like, Ryu has no fucking plot. Like,
yeah,
what? I'm always fascinated by Japan's obsession with making Ryu the main character. and things because I'm like, he has no. I'm like, he
I
has
would
no
be
fucking. He has no character. He has no plot. Like the reason you pick Ryu is because he's kind of like the default character. Like he's got, the sort of like most well known built in moves, like I don't know how to do Hadoukens and Hurricane Kicks or whatever. I'm like, he's just kind of like he's the starting man. He's not like the guy who he's never. It's I don't know. It's a weird thing with me in Street Fighter because I'm like, I love Street Fighter. I actually like its characters. I don't like its story. I just find it funny how much Ryu, gets so much spotlight, and I'm like, he's fucking he's boring, but he's kind of made to be boring. Like the other characters are made to be,
over
have
the top. Yeah.
the over the top eccentric plot points. Like Ryu doesn't have it because it's almost like it's a blessing in a way. He's not bogged down by it. He's just the guy who's trying to be, prove himself to be the best fighter ever, and he doesn't have a fucking plot.
I would have a good time writing a Street Fighter movie, but I'd feel like I would have too much temptation to put in comedy like the other like the already live action one does.
I think comedy's fine. It's just kind of like
Well, the first movie
how and
takes the
where.
piss out of itself all the time,
Yeah.
But a final thought on video game adaptation: Sonic 2 worth it is what you're saying though.
It is, and I think it's a very promising step, as I guess I'm what I'm getting at here. It's a promising step because, like again, like Tyson Hess, who was the guy that brought in to redesign Sonic, is a co-producer on the film, and he's talked about how he snuck in a lot of Easter eggs into the film visually, just sort of like in the background or on walls or whatever, right? Because obviously he's involved in the visual process. He also is probably someone they run stuff by, like, hey, we're thinking of doing this for the movie. Does this sound like something that a Sonic fan would dig? Like, would Sonic do this? Would Tails do this? Would Knuckles do this? Like, and I think we're finally getting to the point where it's like, okay, it's obviously it's not a 1-to-1 adaptation. Like, you're still not going to like Green Hill Zone and Hydro City Zone and Labyrinth Zone. Well, you actually do go Labyrinth Zone. But like, they're not going to like all these crazy fantastical zones in the movie, right? Because you are coming in. You should come into the movie knowing that it has a Earth small town centered, starting point from the last film. But like, so you're missing that fantastical element, but at the same time it also feels like the writers are like, okay, but what is true to the spirit and the characters of the game? How does, we're not going to have Sonic do something that's unsonic like, or say something unsonic like, same with Tails and same with
It's
Knuckles.
not very Sonic like of you, bro.
Right. Well, it's kind of like like there's doing some of the, like, because the games got up their own ass and they're stupid too, but it's like it's kind of nice now that like Sonic's not going out there being like some weird Captain America, right? Like, this is not Sonic. Sonic is the Flash. He's a bit of a wisecracker, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's got a little bit of a, he was marketed from the beginning as always having like more attitude than Mario and stuff like that. But they kind of like play with it in a good way where they're like, okay, yes, he's definitely a wisecracker and he's definitely a bit of an attitude, but he's also a kid. So we're kind of playing it a little more that like, he's growing up. We make that put that into the character growth part of the writing. We're not just going to have him be just sort of like, he's just the same asshole from the beginning to the end, although that's also kind of a joke in the movie, but yeah, like it's giving me hope, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, I think it being a success is probably a better sign for it than if it, like, if it's the same movie that I saw. Like, say it came out and bombed, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it was a bomb, Paramount in the rest of the movie studios would probably look at it and go like, okay, well, what didn't work here? We focused way too hard on fan shit, right? Like, that would probably be the attitude. But now that it's a giant success, they're going to be like, why is this successful? Why is the audience score so high? What is it? And like, they're probably going to be a little bit more listening to like, oh, like having people who grew up with this shit kind of come in, which is honestly, it's exactly what fucking Marvel did.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
A big part of why Marvel worked is because like it wasn't a 1-to-1 adaptation. It was just kind of like, is it true to what the character should be? Like, Tony Stark does get drunk in Iron Man 2, and Tony Stark goes through his own problems, but it's like in the comics, he's a fucking raging alcoholic. Um, and that's not really touched upon, but like they still treat Tony Stark like Tony Stark, and he has his own issues and things he has to go through in the movies, even if he's not this fucking raging alcoholic, right? So
Yeah, I think Marvel's success really though is Hollywood attaches success to a person,
mm.
right?
Hell, people do too. Like the
Yeah,
audience does as well. A
you're
lot of
a winner, you're
people,
always a winner type thing.
yeah, like Kevin Feige is everyone. He is.
Yes.
He's put on a pedestal, right? And
But one thing that
Dave
Marvel
Filoni is put on a pedestal right now. And then
absolutely
but it also goes the other way
Kathleen
because
Kennedy gets shit on, yeah.
everyone hates Kathleen Kennedy. Everything wrong with Star Wars is Kathleen Kennedy's fault, and it's like, oh, she's a terrible person. She doesn't know anything about what she's talking about. But it's like you could look at her resume, and it's like, shut the fuck up. It's like,
So one important thing about Kevin Feige versus say like what's happening at DC, you have continuity of vision for an entire sort of universe, right? He's not trying to be overlord on each individual film. He's trying to set out a roadmap for where the films are going.
mm-hmm.
And then he gets directors that can follow the fucking roadmap. DC keeps
Yeah.
trying to get directors that they can hang victory on. They keep trying to go like, oh, David Ayer, he makes amazing. He made fucking Training Day. He's going to make a dark, gritty, Suicide Squad.
Well, I think
because Nolan was their guy, and Nolan said no.
Nolan said no, and then Nolan actually pushed Snyder, and then they had the Snyderverse, and that's like this weird quagmire where it's like Snyder was their Kevin Feige, but
they were also undercutting him at every corner too, though. It turns out,
but it gets more complicated in a way where it's like, well, what if people don't like the guy you set up to be the visionary for your multi-film deal? And that was happening with Zack Snyder, but then Zack Snyder became the sort of martyr in a way, because like Joss Whedon came in and fucking chopped up his fucking movie because everyone hated BVS, and because BVS is a terrible film. So they had the guy who
Don't
did
let
Avenger.
Twitter hear you say that.
BVS fucking sucked. So the guy who made the first two Avengers movies is going to come in and chop up what this guy did for Justice League, and I think that has its own problem, because it's like, I've heard from people who were just like me, and like, I didn't like any of Zack Snyder's films, but like, he had a better Justice League, even at 4 hours, than Joss Whedon did. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably because it was someone else with an entirely different vision and mindset chopping up a film that was already done and made from the guy who made it. Yes, like, because from what I understand, Zack Snyder's Justice League, even if you don't like Zack Snyder's DC takes, at least thematically, tonally follows the films leading up to his Justice League. So I can see, I haven't watched it because I value my life, and I'm not going to watch 4 hours of that.
It's good. It's actually,
but like,
good.
I'm not going to argue or disagree with the fact that like it's probably a better film, because it's tonally consistent and follows up on his last film like it should, right? So okay, sure. But at the end of the day, I still hate Zack Snyder's take on DC, and all the you go back in time and look at the interviews about Zack Snyder and the things he said about wanting Batman's origin to be him serving time in prison where he got raped. Not kidding, not a joke, not exaggerated either. And then there's the story about him where he talked about how he wasn't into comic books in college. He liked Frank Frazetta stuff and like Conan stuff. And he literally, his own words were like, I wanted comics with like fucking and gore. No one's having sex in these like fucking comics. Like, the guy just kind of comes off as like a child, and in a way sometimes. Like, I don't mean to just super disrespect the guy, but it's kind of like, the reasons you didn't like DC was because they didn't go all in on the violence, blood, gore, and sex. And it's like, what are you, fucking 13?
Well, I don't know. You don't hire that guy to be the voice or the view and then undercut him at every turn and then go, Zach, why are you fucking up our movies? You can't do that.
That's a good point too, because WB's getting upset because they're not making Marvel money. So it's like the guy you gave the keys to, all of a sudden you're blaming him for doing what he asked you to do.
You know, and one thing that I will say for DC movies versus Marvel movies is one, DC movies tend to take more risks in terms of like visuals and shit too.
You can say that. You
Um,
absolutely, it's hard to deny that. And broadly speaking, I feel DC's more open
Yeah.
to multimedia projects not connected to. I'm not talking about just connected to, does this film connect to this movie, like building the DC movie universe, right?
Hmm.
Beyond just that, just DC in general, it feels like DC is like, can we make, can we make an R-rated uh TV show, for Harley Quinn? Sure. Will Marvel ever make, in this point in time, would Marvel make an R-rated series, not a one-off, not a one-time movie, but like a whole series of Deadpool, like super R-rated gory Deadpool? Probably not.
No.
Even
Well,
with
it's not going to live on fucking Disney Plus
Disney
for sure.
Plus, right? Yeah, like even with the success Deadpool has proven itself to be, it's like, and that's why I'm scared for shit like Blade, because I'm like, everyone keeps saying like, you don't, and I just said it myself, like you don't need to have gore to be good. You don't need, a film doesn't have to be rated R to be good. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know how you make Blade work without
Yeah.
gore. Like he's a fucking vampire.
And you
Like
gotta get Guillermo del Toro back. You gotta bring him back.
yeah,
Did he
did
make
two.
Did he make the worst Blade?
He made
Maybe.
the best Blade.
Maybe.
Well, he did Blade 2.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's
he
I
didn't have
look
anything to do with
look.
Blade 3. That was David Goyer.
No, that's yeah, that's fair. No, but I mean, 2 isn't that great either. I'm
Really?
sorry.
I thought everyone liked 2.
It's fine. None of the Blade movies are like amazing. Is all I'm getting at. Like they were.
I'm just kind of like, but why would you try to, like, make it work within a PG-13 setting? It's fucking
No, it's a waste of
Blade.
time.
I just
We're
but
gonna
like,
go
yes,
back to the R-rated all the time. Like it's gonna cycle through to that
yeah,
shit.
well,
Don't
it's like
worry.
okay, the brand new added first third of Killing Joke is awful beyond words. However, DC is still the company that said, yeah, let's make an R-rated Killing Joke movie. We'll
Yeah,
get
gotta give
Mark
him props for that for sure.
let's pull in Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy and let's do an R-rated Killing Joke, because Marvel's not going to do that. Like they're not going to have like, hey, let's make an animated Marvel movie and make it R-rated as fuck and have all kinds of disgusting all this fucked up shit, allegories of like sexual assault and violence and shit. And like, no, Marvel's never going to do that. Marvel has a brand, unfortunately.
And they are consistent. Gotta
Yeah,
give them that.
and it works. But I also feel having a broader, looser thing can also work. And
Absolutely. Well,
maybe
that's what I'm saying is WB should stop trying to build a universe and just
Mm,
start making one-off good movies that have their own worlds in them.
like Joker.
Yeah, absolutely. They could absolutely murder it doing that.
I
Because
think
then
that
you
was
can get auteurs. You can go get, fucking.
and I think Joker was the first film to break $1 billion at the box office without China. It was the first film
I
that
didn't know
made
that.
it to. I think it was the first film that made it to $1 billion without China. And it's like, there you go. I mean, granted, that's pre-apocalypse, but to me, it's just kind of like, there you go, right there. You had an R-rated Joker movie that had nothing to do with. I mean, technically, Bruce Wayne's in it for like fucking a minute as a
Y-
kid.
Yeah.
But it's like, it is in no way is it part of the movie or part of the plot, really. Like, it's just this weird fucking like it basically just like, hey, we're gonna make like Taxi Driver with the character of the Joker, because
Yeah.
like, let's just do that. Let's just do something fucking weird like that, and it works, and it makes them $1 billion. So, um,
And now they want to make a sequel to it. And I'm like, no, don't do that.
no, don't do.
Don't do
Actually, I
that.
don't.
Move on.
And again, I you know what? I kept thinking about that movie when I was done watching Sonic. I'd say, how the fuck does that work? And I'm like, it's like this. Do you remember the last line of the film of the Joker, where he's just sitting in the jail cell with the therapist? and she just asks him like, what's so funny? Why are you laughing? And he just goes, "You wouldn't get it."
Yeah.
And I think that is what is happening to the critics and sort of the people who have no real fucking knowledge of Sonic, and it'll happen with any video game adaptation where it's like, if you have a really good adapted video game and some people are like, well, it's good, it's okay, but I don't understand why people are losing their minds over it. And I'm like, you know what?
You just
You
wouldn't
wouldn't
get
get
it.
it.
On that
You
note,
wouldn't get it.
we got producers to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames our producers for this episode are The Arnett, Screwnami, Top 35, Hyper Viper 89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes, and we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.